I've always loved hiking with my grandpa. Every summer, we'd pick a new trail, pack our peanut butter sandwiches, and hit the dirt path, ready to explore the wilderness. Grandpa's got this old backpack that looks like it's been through at least 3 world wars, but he says it's good luck. I think it's just full of weird junk, maps he doesn't use, a rusty compass, and some snacks from who knows when. Still, I wouldn't trade those hikes for anything. One summer, we decided to tackle a trail out in the middle of nowhere. Grandpa had heard about it from one of his buddies, who are always full of wild stories. The trail wasn't on any map, which should have been my first clue that things were going to get weird. But I was eager to spend time with him, and besides, hiking with Grandpa always led to some sort of adventure. Whether it was a close encounter with a squirrel or stepping into a puddle that was much deeper than it looked, we always had a story to tell afterward. The drive to the trailhead took us deep into the mountains, where the trees seemed taller than skyscrapers. It was the kind of place where your phone lost signal 5 miles ago, and the nearest gas station was probably still stuck in the 1970s. Perfect for a quiet day out in nature. The trail started easy enough, with a nice flat path weaving between the trees. Grandpa led the way, using a walking stick he carved himself from some tree back in the day. As we hiked deeper into the forest, things started to get strange. It wasn't anything too obvious at first, just little things, like how the birds stopped singing after a while. Then the wind picked up even though the trees around us weren't moving much. Every so often we'd hear this weird crackling noise, but when we looked around, there was nothing. Grandpa, being the seasoned hiker he is, didn't seem bothered. Nature has its quirks, he always says, which I figured applied here too. But the deeper we went, the more off things felt. At one point, I stopped to retie my shoe, and that's when I saw it. A footprint. Not just any footprint. This thing was massive. Bigger than my size 11 foot, and I've got pretty big feet. It looked like a regular footprint, just on a much larger scale. Like someone with feet the size of canoes had decided to walk barefoot through the forest. Grandpa, I called out, pointing at the giant print in the dirt. He shuffled over, squinting at it with his bushy eyebrows raised. Instead of looking concerned, Grandpa grinned like a kid who just found candy in his pocket. Bigfoot, he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I laughed, thinking he was joking. Bigfoot? Seriously? But then I realized Grandpa wasn't laughing. He gave the footprint a good long look, then shrugged and kept walking. Now, I don't believe in Bigfoot. At least I didn't. But after seeing that footprint, I wasn't so sure anymore. I mean, who or what else could make a footprint that big out here in the middle of nowhere? We kept hiking, but now my ears were on high alert. Every little rustle in the bushes or snap of a twig made my heart race. I glanced behind us more often than usual, just in case a giant, hairy creature was creeping up on us. About an hour later, we found a clearing where we could stop for lunch. Grandpa pulled out his ancient thermos, which, like his backpack, had probably seen better days. I unwrapped my sandwich, but before I could take a bite, I noticed something again. It was walking on 2 legs. 2 very big, hairy legs. I blinked, thinking maybe I was just seeing things. But no, it was still there, casually strolling between the trees like it owned the place. I froze. My sandwich dangled halfway to my mouth as I stared. The creature was huge. Its arms were long, and it had this kind of lumbering walk, like it wasn't in any hurry. And the smell, oh man, I didn't notice it until the wind shifted, but there was this musty, wet dog odor wafting through the air. It was like someone had left a pile of dirty gym clothes out in the rain for a week. Grandpa didn't seem fazed at all. He glanced over at the creature, then back at me with a shrug. Told you Bigfoot was real. I was too stunned to say anything. My brain was trying to process the fact that I had just seen Bigfoot. The Bigfoot. The creature that people always talk about but never actually see. And there it was, just chilling in the woods like it wasn't the most elusive cryptid in existence. When it was gone, I finally managed to say, "Did we really just see that?" Grandpa just chuckled. "Nature's full of surprises." I couldn't believe how calm he was about the whole thing. Meanwhile, my mind was racing. Should I tell someone? Call a news station? Write a book? But then I realized, who would believe me? Bigfoot sightings are always dismissed as hoaxes or blurry photos taken from too far away. As we drove home, Grandpa hummed a little tune, like it was just another normal day in the woods. I never used to believe in weird animal sightings. Growing up around nature, you'd think I'd be the type to see all kinds of things, but no, I was more of a need-proof kind of person. Then, one random evening, something happened that totally threw me off. It was a cool autumn day. I decided to head out for a walk in the woods on the edge of town, like I usually did. The trees were showing off their bright reds, oranges, and yellows, and everything felt calm. There was that quiet you only get in nature, where it's just you, the wind, and the soft rustle of leaves. The sun was starting to set, and everything was bathed in this warm, golden light. It was almost too perfect, like one of those moments you'd see in a nature documentary. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. Normally, I'd see a few deer, maybe a squirrel or two. But that evening, the forest felt different. It's hard to explain, but the usual sounds, the birds, the wind, seemed quieter. I shrugged it off, figuring maybe I was just imagining things, and kept walking. That's when I caught something out of the corner of my eye. It was just a flicker of movement, really subtle, but enough to make me stop. I scanned the area, expecting to see maybe a fox or a rabbit. But no, what I saw was a cat, except not your typical house cat. This one was different. I know how this is going to sound, but I swear this cat was like nothing I'd ever seen. It wasn't silver like you'd expect, but sliver is the only way I can describe it. Its fur wasn't shiny or reflective, but it had this weird translucent quality, almost like it was barely there, just a sliver of a cat, slipping through the trees like a shadow. I blinked a few times, but it was real. The way it moved was unreal, silent, graceful, and smooth, like it wasn't even touching the ground. Its fur rippled as it passed through patches of light, making it blend into the surroundings in a way that was hard to track. I thought maybe I was losing it, but then its eyes locked onto mine, and I froze. Those eyes were something else. Pale, almost foggy, like they were hiding some kind of deep secret. There was this eerie intelligence behind them, like the cat knew something I didn't. It wasn't scary, though. If anything, I was just mesmerized. I stood there, not sure what to do. I didn't want to scare it off, but I also couldn't just walk away. It was more like I was in on some unspoken secret. The cat just stared at me for a moment before slipping through the trees again, barely making a sound. Without even thinking about it, I started following it. Now, I know how this sounds. Who follows a random mysterious cat into the woods, right? But I wasn't really thinking. I just had this feeling that I needed to. So, I kept my distance, moving slowly. The path we were on was one I hadn't taken before, which was weird because I thought I knew this area pretty well. The cat, though, moved like it knew exactly where it was going. I kept following it, not sure what I expected, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led somewhere important. 1 second it was there, gliding through the trees ahead of me, and the next, it was gone. No sound, no trace, just gone. I stood there for a while, staring at the spot where I'd last seen it, half hoping it would come back. After a few minutes, I gave up and started heading back. The walk home felt weird, like I'd just woken up from a strange dream. By the time I got out of the woods and back to town, it all felt a little unreal. Did I really just follow a see-through cat into the middle of nowhere? It seemed crazy, but at the same time, I knew what I'd seen. I've gone back to that spot a few times since then, but I haven't seen the sliver cat again. Sometimes I wonder if it was just passing through or if it's still out there, hiding in the shadows, watching me without me knowing. Whatever it was, that sliver cat. Something about it felt important, like I was supposed to see it, even if just for a little while. It's one of those things I'll probably never fully understand, but I'm okay with that. Not everything needs an explanation, I guess. Some things just happen, and we get lucky enough to witness them. I had never been to Ireland before, but when I arrived to visit my fiancée, the air seemed alive with whispers. It was a small town nestled among green hills, and although it seemed like the perfect postcard picture, something felt different. Everywhere I went, people eyed me curiously, as if I had walked into something bigger than I could comprehend. At first, I thought it was just the novelty of being an outsider, but as the days passed, I realized it wasn't just that. There was something else they were talking about, something that filled them with a mix of fear and fascination. One evening, as we sat by the fire, my fiancée brought it up. She explained that it had to do with the hungry grass, a strange legend from Irish mythology. I had never heard of it before, but I leaned in, interested in what she had to say. The idea of cursed grass was strange, yet intriguing. Hungry grass, she told me, was no ordinary patch of greenery. It looked just like any other tuft of grass on the rolling hills, but the curse attached to it was said to be ancient. The story went that anyone who stepped on this cursed grass would be stricken with an unbearable, gnawing hunger. The hunger, however, wasn't just the type you get when you miss a meal. This hunger burrowed deep into the bones, clawing its way through your entire being. No matter how much food you ate, you would never feel full again. The hunger was insatiable, never-ending, and left a person weak and desperate long after stepping off the patch. The weakness, according to the stories, would fade over time, but the hunger would always remain. I remember thinking that it sounded ridiculous. Cursed grass? Insatiable hunger? How could anyone believe such a thing? But as I spent more time in the town, I began to notice subtle signs that people really did believe it. The locals seemed cautious about where they walked, especially when venturing into the more isolated parts of the countryside. No one wanted to risk coming across the dreaded hungry grass. They didn't talk about it openly, but the whispers I overheard in the pubs and the way people looked over their shoulders while walking through the fields told me that the fear was real. I was curious, but I never actually saw anything out of the ordinary. No patches of grass that looked cursed, no strange phenomena. But one afternoon, as we were hiking through the countryside, I felt a chill in the air. The sky had darkened suddenly, though the weather had been clear when we started our walk. My fiancée and I were making our way up a gentle hill, enjoying the scenery, when I noticed something odd. The grass just ahead of us seemed different. It wasn't the color, because it looked green and lush, just like the rest of the hills around us. But there was something unsettling about it. Maybe it was the way it swayed ever so slightly in the breeze, or maybe it was the silence that suddenly surrounded us as we approached it. The birds that had been chirping just moments before had gone quiet, and the wind that had been rustling the trees seemed to die down. I slowed my steps, unsure of why. My fiancée must have sensed something too, because she hesitated next to me, glancing at the patch of grass with a strange look on her face. Neither of us said anything, but we didn't need to. We both knew what we were thinking. Was this the hungry grass? I didn't step on it. We both walked around the patch carefully, giving it a wide berth. It was silly, I told myself. It was just a story, a superstition, but something deep inside me didn't want to take the risk. We continued our walk in silence, the unease lingering in the air even after we were far past that spot. In the following days, I couldn't stop thinking about that patch of grass. Had it really been the cursed hungry grass? Or was it just my imagination playing tricks on me? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply the legend had wormed its way into my mind. Even though I never truly believed in it, the idea of it haunted me in a way that I couldn't shake. I began to understand why the townspeople were so cautious, why they whispered about it in hushed tones. We never did see anyone affected by the hungry grass, but the signs were there. The strange quiet, the shift in the air, the tension that wrapped itself around the town like a creeping vine. It was as if the legend had soaked into the land itself, becoming a part of the very hills and valleys that surrounded us. Maybe it wasn't about whether the hungry grass was real or not. Maybe it was about the power of belief and how stories could shape the way we saw the world around us. My name is Martin, and I'm a ghost hunter. I've always been fascinated by the supernatural, and exploring old, forgotten places is what I live for. The thrill of venturing into the unknown, not knowing what might happen next, is exciting. This is the story of the night I came face to face with a ghoul. It started with an abandoned graveyard that caught the attention of my friend, Sam, and me. We had heard rumors about strange noises and ghostly sightings in the area, and our curiosity got the best of us. We planned a nighttime urban exploration, or urbex as some call it. The cemetery had been deserted for decades, and nature had long since claimed the tombstones and mausoleums. It was the perfect place for our next ghost hunt. Armed with our flashlights, cameras, and a voice recorder, Sam and I entered the cemetery. The rusty gate creaked as we pushed it open, sending a chill down my spine. Inside, the place was silent, except for the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. As we made our way through the graveyard, we noticed how some of the graves had sunken in, and many of the tombstones were cracked or tilted. We split up to cover more ground, keeping in touch with our walkie-talkies. I wandered deeper into the cemetery, feeling a strange tension in the air. There was something different about this place. It wasn't like other haunted spots we had explored before. The air felt heavy, and the deeper I went, the more uneasy I became. As I walked among the graves, I stumbled upon a large mausoleum. Its stone walls were weathered, and the iron gate at the entrance was covered in rust. Something about it drew me in, and I decided to investigate. I pushed the gate open, and it groaned as if protesting my intrusion. Inside, the air was stale and damp, and the darkness was thick. I turned on my flashlight and shined it around the room. There were several stone coffins, all covered in dust. Suddenly, I heard a noise from behind me. It was faint, but unmistakable. It sounded like something scraping against the stone floor. I froze for a moment, listening intently. The sound came again, louder this time. Then I saw a figure, hunched and twisted, crawling out from behind one of the coffins. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. Its skin was pale and gray, stretched tightly over its skeletal frame. Its eyes were sunken and black, and its mouth was full of jagged teeth. I recognized it instantly from the stories I had read. A ghoul, a creature from Arabic folklore, said to haunt graveyards and feast on human flesh. I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor as I watched the ghoul slowly rise to its full height. It was tall, its limbs long and spindly. The way it moved was unnatural, almost insect-like. The creature's hollow eyes locked onto mine, and I could feel the air grow colder. My body finally reacted, and I stumbled backward, trying to get away. I fumbled for my walkie-talkie, my hands shaking. I managed to call out to Sam, telling him what I had seen, but the words barely made sense even to me. I could hear Sam's voice crackling through the speaker, but I wasn't listening. My focus was entirely on the ghoul, which had begun to move toward me, its movements jerky and uncoordinated. Panic surged through me, and I turned and bolted out of the mausoleum. My flashlight bounced in my hand as I sprinted through the cemetery, desperate to escape. The sound of something dragging behind me echoed in the darkness, growing louder with every second. I didn't dare look back. All I could think about was getting out of there. I saw Sam ahead, running toward me, his flashlight beam dancing through the graveyard. He must have heard my panic over the walkie-talkie. I yelled for him to run, and without asking questions, he turned and bolted toward the entrance. We raced through the cemetery, our hearts pounding in our chests. We reached the gate and slammed it shut behind us, panting and out of breath. For a moment, we stood in silence, trying to process what had just happened. I could still feel the ghoul's eyes on me, even though we were outside the cemetery. Sam asked me what I had seen, but I couldn't find the words to describe it. It was something that couldn't be explained easily, something that shouldn't exist. As we stood there, catching our breath, I realized the graveyard was silent again. The only sound was the wind rustling the trees. But I knew that whatever was in that mausoleum wasn't gone. The ghoul was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. It was a night I would never forget. A group of us had gathered on the snowy hills, far from the noise and lights of the city, to watch the aurora borealis. The northern lights, as they're also called, are said to be one of the most beautiful sights on Earth. I had never seen them before, and my heart pounded with excitement as I stood in the cold. The sky was clear and vast, a deep black canvas dotted with stars. We stood in silence, waiting for the first signs of color to appear. The air was cold, but not biting. Our breaths formed soft clouds as we looked up, eager for the show to begin. And then it happened. The first ribbons of light appeared, faint and distant, like the soft glow of a candle just lit. They shimmered across the sky, slowly growing in intensity, turning from pale white to shades of green and purple. The lights danced and swirled, moving in graceful arcs, as if the sky itself was alive and full of joy. It was breathtaking, more beautiful than I had imagined. I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me as I watched, lost in the beauty of it all. The world seemed so small beneath that vast sky. I was so absorbed in the lights that I almost didn't notice the odd shape that appeared in the distance, high above the trees. At first, I thought it was just another part of the aurora, a strange pattern in the lights. But as I squinted and focused, I realized it was something else entirely. The shape was darker than the surrounding sky, a solid mass against the glowing lights. It didn't move like the aurora. It was still, almost too still. I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Could it be a cloud, a trick of the light? But then, it started to move. Slowly, it drifted across the sky, almost gliding, as if it were floating effortlessly. This was no cloud. It was something else, something much larger and much closer than the lights themselves. The object was round, with a faint glow outlining its edges. As it moved, I could see faint details, lines or markings almost like patterns etched across its surface. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before, and it definitely wasn't natural. My mind raced, trying to come up with explanations. A satellite, maybe? Or some sort of experimental aircraft? But deep down, I knew it was neither of those things. It didn't feel man-made. It felt otherworldly. The object hovered for a moment, then began to descend slowly, coming closer to the ground. I felt a strange pull in my chest, a mix of fear and curiosity. Every instinct in me wanted to run, to get as far away as possible. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, staring up at the strange thing in the sky. The others around me seemed frozen as well, their eyes fixed on the object. The world felt still, like time had stopped, and all that existed was this moment, this sight. As it came closer, the glow around the object became more intense, casting an eerie light over the snow and trees. Suddenly, the object stopped, hovering just above the ground, maybe 100 feet away from where we stood. There was no sound, no wind, nothing but the quiet hum of energy that seemed to vibrate in the air around it. I stared at it. My brain couldn't process what was happening. It felt like a dream, like something too strange to be real. But it was real. I could feel it. The weight of its presence pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. The object stayed there, hovering silently, its strange patterns shimmering in the faint light. I didn't know what it was, or why it was here. All I knew was that it wasn't from this world. Then it began to rise again. Slowly it lifted off the ground, drifting back into the sky. The glow around it pulsed once, twice, and then, in a blink, it was gone. Disappeared into the night, swallowed by the stars and the swirling lights of the aurora. We didn't speak. There were no words to describe what had just happened. We had come to see the beauty of the aurora borealis, but we had seen something far more extraordinary, something that would stay with us for the rest of our lives.